We often look back at the Middle Ages as a gap in history, a thousand-year pause between the glory of Rome and the brilliance of the Renaissance. We imagine mud, ignorance, and darkness, but this is a lie. The Middle Ages were not a pause, they were a forge. Amidst the chaos of falling empires, religious wars, and catastrophic plagues, the foundations of the modern world were being laid. Nobles, kings, faith, warfare, and innovation collided to create something entirely new. This is the story of how Europe was born. Our story begins with the end. In the first 2 centuries of the Common Era, the Roman Empire was the master of the known world, engulfing the entire Mediterranean in the Pax Romana, a time of relative peace, centralized government, and advanced infrastructure. But empires, like people, get old. By the 4th century, Rome was crumbling under the weight of inflation, plagues, and relentless invasions. It became too massive to manage from a single throne. In 395 CE, the empire was sliced in two. The rich, urban Eastern Empire ruled from Constantinople, and the rural, weakening Western Empire ruled from Rome. While the East thrived, the West was dying. Beyond the Rhine and Danube rivers, Germanic tribes, barbarians to the Romans, were pressing against the borders. Eventually, the dam broke. Whether they came as refugees or conquerors, these tribes carved up the Roman territory. The final nail in the coffin came in for 76 CE, when the barbarian warlord Odoacer forced the child emperor Romulus Augustulus to step down. The Western Roman Empire was dead. The so-called Dark Ages had begun. By the year 500, the map of Europe had been redrawn. The orderly Roman provinces were replaced by Germanic kingdoms, the Ostrogoths in Italy, the Visigoths in Spain, and the Franks in Gaul. These new rulers tried to emulate Rome, converting to Christianity and blending with the local elites. But the infrastructure of the ancient world was vanishing. Great cities emptied into ruins. The complex Roman road networks decayed, stopping long-distance trade. Coins disappeared, forcing a return to barter. Literacy plummeted. The West became a localized, fragmented, and silent world. In the 6th century, the Eastern Roman Empire, now called the Byzantines, tried to turn back the clock. Emperor Justinian I launched a massive campaign to reconquer the West, retaking Italy, but it was a fleeting victory. New invaders, the Lombards, swarmed into the peninsula, proving that the split between East and West was permanent. But an even greater division was coming. In the 7th century, a new power exploded out of the Arabian desert. Arab armies swept across the Middle East and North Africa, creating a massive Islamic caliphate. The Mediterranean, once a Roman lake, was now fractured into 3 distinct civilizations: the Islamic South, the Byzantine East, and the Latin medieval West. For a moment, it looked like the West would fall completely. Muslim armies crushed the Visigoths in Spain and marched into France. But in 732, at the Battle of Tours, the Franks under Charles Martel stopped the advance. This victory secured the future of Western Christendom and established a new dynasty, the Carolingian. It was Charles Martel's grandson, Charlemagne, who would try to light a candle in the dark. Ascending the throne in 768, he spent decades conquering and unifying Western Europe. In the year 800, Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans, the first in the West in 3 centuries. Charlemagne's empire sparked a cultural revival, a mini-renaissance of learning and art, and established the dream of a unified Christian West. But dreams are fragile. The Carolingian infrastructure was too weak to hold a vast empire together. After Charlemagne's death, his grandsons fought over the inheritance, splitting the empire in the Treaty of Verdun in 843. These fragments would eventually become France and Germany, but in the short term they were just targets. In the 9th and 10th centuries, Europe was besieged from all sides. Muslim raiders struck from the south, Magyar horsemen plundered from the east, and from the north came the Vikings, terrorizing the rivers and coasts. Under this relentless pressure, kings could not protect their people. Power devolved to local warlords who could build fortifications. This gave rise to feudalism. The countryside became dotted with wooden castles. In exchange for protection, free peasants became serfs, working the land for local lords. Warfare changed, too. The introduction of the stirrup made cavalry, the master of the battlefield, creating a class of professional warrior nobles, the knights. Society became a web of personal loyalties, vassals swearing fealty to lords in exchange for land. But history is cyclical, and the tide began to turn around the year 1000. A warming climate improved agriculture, increasing food production and fueling a population boom. The invaders settled down. The Vikings became Normans, the Magyars became Hungarians, and both converted to Christianity. The raids stopped. Stability returned. With stability came growth. Old Roman cities swelled with new life. A commercial revolution began as merchants reconnected trade routes, forming self-governing cities that broke away from feudal lords. In the intellectual sphere, the first universities were founded, sparking a rediscovery of ancient logic and science. Europe was feeling confident enough to expand. In 1066, William the Conqueror, a Norman duke, invaded and transformed England. In Spain, Christian kingdoms began the Reconquest, pushing south against Muslim rule. and in 1095, this expansionist energy exploded outward when Pope Urban II called for the Crusades. For 2 centuries, European armies marched to the Holy Land, while the Crusader states eventually fell. They proved that the West, and specifically the Catholic Church, had become a superpower. The Church itself had transformed. No longer a loose network of priests controlled by local nobles, it had become a centralized papal monarchy. Pope Gregory VII famously clashed with the Holy Roman Emperor over who had the right to appoint bishops, a conflict that ended with the emperor kneeling in the snow at Canossa, begging for forgiveness. By the 12th century, the Pope was arguably the most powerful ruler in Europe. Kings envious of this power began to consolidate their own. In England and France, monarchs slowly built centralized bureaucracies, curbing the power of the unruly barons. Europe was thriving. It was a high point of culture, chivalry, and Gothic architecture. But biology does not care about politics. Around 1300, the climate cooled and famine returned. Then, in 1347, the apocalypse arrived. The Black Death swept across the continent with terrifying speed. In just a few years, it killed approximately 1/3 of the European population. It was a tragedy of unimaginable scale, but paradoxically for the survivors, the world improved. With fewer people, labor became scarce. Peasants could demand higher wages and better rights. The rigid structures of feudalism began to crack. Out of this darkness came a burst of innovation. The 14th and 15th centuries saw the spread of wind and water mills, the invention of eyeglasses, and the revolutionary printing press. In Italy, a new intellectual movement, the Renaissance, began to look back at Greece and Rome, not just to copy them, but to surpass them. Warfare changed forever with the arrival of gunpowder. The armored knight, dominant for centuries, could now be killed by a peasant with a firearm. The mightiest castle could be shattered by cannons. This made war expensive, meaning only centralized kings, not local dukes, could afford armies. This solidified the rise of the sovereign state. By the late 1400s, the map of Europe looked different. England and France had been forged in the fires of the 100 Years' War. Spain was unified under Ferdinand and Isabella. The Middle Ages were ending, not with a whimper but with a horizon expanding. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west, and Vasco da Gama sailed south. Europe had survived its birth pangs. It turned its gaze from the internal struggle for survival to the conquest of the globe. The modern era had begun. What do you think was the most critical moment in this 1,000-year saga? Was it the fall of Rome or the invention of the printing press? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Omen Myths for more history rewritten.